Hey there, coaches. I'm Rich Prado, owner of Play in School and host of Travel Ball Talk, where I talk to travel ball coaches from the best organizations about the current and future state of travel baseball. This week's guest is John Rhodes, founder of the Diamond Devils, based in Charleston, South Carolina. The Diamond Devils definitely fall into the OG category of travel baseball organizations, starting up in 1999 and probably the first in South Carolina. Well, we didn't discuss it during the recording. I want to mention that John hosts a winter camp in mid-January every year. 2021 will mark the 23rd winter in a row running. He'll run the camp at the College of Charleston, and the camp is open to the public. So if you're looking for an excuse to head to one of the most popular cities in the country in January, this might be the camp for you. You can find the info for his camp at diamonddevils.org. And I hope you enjoy this episode of Travel Ball Talk. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Travel Ball Talk. I'm your host, owner of Play in School, Rich Prado. Today I've got a good friend of mine on the show today, John Rhodes, founder, owner of the Diamond Devils, headquartered down in beautiful Charleston, South Carolina. Coach, welcome to the show, man. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Trying to keep busy. We're 60, I don't know where we are, 65 or 70 episodes into this thing. I can't believe it's taken this long to get you on the show. So you were, it was one of those things where you were sort of in the top 5 or 10, and it just got kicked down the road a little bit. But here we are. We're finally here. So I'm excited to kind of share your story and share the story of the Diamond Devils with people across the country who, maybe aren't super familiar with you guys, and then talk about some of the other stuff that you have going on in your life and your baseball life.
Okay.
Before we get too deep into this thing, why don't I just step out of the way for a little bit and let you kind of introduce yourself, give us your baseball background, if you will, and then transition that straight into the foundation of the Diamond Devils, which are 20 plus years old already. So go for it, man. Let me get out of the way.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, I got started in coaching back in 1980, living in Bradenton, Florida, when we signed our son up for T-ball, and got a call one Sunday afternoon, and they said, your son is on such and such a team, and, oh, by the way, would you like to coach the team? And I said, well, I'd love to get into that, but I'm really way too busy for that kind of stuff. But the good thing was the guy that I was talking to turned out to be a really good salesman, and about 30 minutes later I had a T-ball team. Yeah. And I've been coaching ever since. Down there, it evolved into coaching, in Little League, in high school, coaching JV, helping with varsity, helping with Junior Legion. And so it just kind of evolved, and we started fall baseball down there. Then moved back to South Carolina in 1991, and in 92 we started fall baseball and had our first tournament, if that's what you want to call it. It's basically only 16 teams here in Charleston, and had a great time doing that. So it has just evolved from there. The Diamond Devils came about. I coached American Legion baseball throughout the 90s up into 1998 when we won the state championship and lost in the finals of the Southeast Regional. And actually I had several really good baseball players who were getting very, very limited exposure and attention. And one of them ended up being the number 10 pick in the draft 5 years later when he came out of South Carolina. So we had been doing some tournaments in the fall as part of the Legion thing, and just decided it was time to get out and do it full time, year round. So in 99, we started Diamond Devil Baseball, and started with one 18-year-old team, and playing in tournaments, hosting a handful of tournaments. Now we host about 15 a year, and we have usually anywhere from 7 to 10 or 11 teams per season, just depending on the season. That's really how this all came about. It's just been an evolution. It wasn't one of those things where I said, okay, let's start doing this. It just kind of evolved from being involved in baseball and love dealing with the kids.
Quick question. Who was that draft pick who was that 10th pick in the draft?
Drew Meyer.
Got it. I want to go back to something. When you first started coaching in the 80s, you got duped into it, like probably many dads do. Man, if you go on Twitter and you look at these Twitter gurus, the dad coaches really get a bad reputation. So much so that some organizations specifically market that they don't have dad coaches because apparently dad coaches don't know anything about baseball. I was coached by my dad the entire way through. You coached your son the entire way through, it sounds like. And I don't know why I point this out other than this, I wish it didn't have. I understand what they're saying. The phrase "daddy ball." I get that, but if we eliminated every father out of the coaching, profession, if you will, what a shame! It would be terrible. It would be terrible.
Yeah. I'm Rich. I'm going to tell you, you're absolutely right. Actually, from both directions.
Right.
In my opinion. Okay. Now, I say that because in my experience, the best baseball coach that has ever coached with me is Richard Wieters, who you may know his son's name. It's Matt Wieters, who's now in 12 years in the major leagues. And I will tell you, Richard was an outstanding baseball guy in his own right. He was 2-time Southern Conference Player of the Year as both a pitcher and a hitter. And then he spent 10 years in pro ball himself. But not everybody can do that, be that good a player and spend that much time in pro ball and end up being a good coach. But Richard's a very good coach. And, I mean, right now today, we don't have a set rule that dads can't coach because, to me, that's pretty short-sighted.
Yeah.
You just eliminated what could be a really good group of people who are very knowledgeable and experienced. They just happen to be the father of a baseball player.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make sense to me. Right now today, we have 5 guys coaching in our program whose sons are playing in our program. Now, most of them are all baseball people. Well, they're all baseball people, but most of them are like high school coaches. Mm-hmm. That sons have finally gotten of age. Like I have one gentleman who this will be his 21st year coaching in our program. Oh. And this past summer, for the first time ever, he coached his own son here. His son just turned 14. So, and for me to say to him, well, listen, you have a son now, so either your son can't play in our program or you can't coach in our program, is like cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Yeah. And I understand what these guys are saying about daddy ball. I get that. But
no, I do too.
I feel like it's too the folks who are saying these and they make these hard rules with no exceptions, and any dad that coaches is not the. It makes way too many assumptions. And then the flip side is making the assumption that some guy that played pro ball for 10 years is a good coach, that's right. Which is not true. It's not true. These things, just because you could hit a ball doesn't mean you can teach a 10-year-old. These things
Matter of fact,
do not guarantee anything.
Down in Florida, we had access to the Pittsburgh Pirates regularly. They were great supporters of the Little League program down there. And most of those guys will tell you that I can't coach. God gave me this ability to hit this baseball, or he gave me the ability to throw 95 miles an hour. You can't teach that. God just gives you that ability. And for a lot of those guys, they cannot transfer that information successfully to anybody else, much less kids. Mm-hmm. So you just can't assume that makes them a good coach.
Yeah.
And you can't assume that because, they have sons that they're going to be a quote-unquote daddy ball coach. I'll tell you, Rich, one of the things I learned during all of this long process is when I'm looking at players and they're playing for their dads, whether it's their dad's team or he's just the assistant coach, I will try. I don't ask for a roster. I just try and figure out if I can figure out who the coach's son is without somebody helping.
Yeah.
And if I can, in either direction, good or bad, that's not a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
no
not.
doubt.
And I say good or bad, sometimes you have these dads that the kids can do no wrong. They're absolutely terrible, but they're the shortstop and they hit cleanup because they're dad's son.
Right.
The head coach, boy, he's going to do this, or he's going to pitch, and he couldn't throw the ball in the ocean if you put him in the boat, kind of thing.
And sometimes the opposite happens where they bear down too hard on their own kid to try to counteract any sort of complaints from the other families.
Absolutely. And those are the worst guys.
Yeah.
I mean, because they make it uncomfortable and bad for everybody.
Yeah.
By especially for their own son, which is a sad thing.
Yeah.
Oh.
Anyway, this was an interesting thing that just popped into my head when I heard you telling this. When you got duped into coaching. I'm glad you got duped into coaching back in 1980.
Yeah, me too.
So when you made that move from, so your kid was probably in 1980. He was what, 5 years old?
Yes.
So then you end up moving 11 years later in 91 to South Carolina. That puts him at about 16 years old. So he was already in high school when you transitioned from Florida to South Carolina. Is that am I doing my math right?
Yeah.
So Florida, obviously, talent-rich environment. Although Bradenton's up in the Panhandle, so it's maybe.
No,
Bradenton is down by Sarasota. I was thinking Destin for some reason. I don't know why Destin popped into my head. So definitely a talent-rich environment down there in the Tampa, sort of Sarasota area, if you will. What was the transition for your son like going from Florida to South Carolina baseball? Was it pretty equal, or was it much better in Florida at that time?
Well, one of the things we tried to do when we moved back there, and we moved back because of my parents' ill health, and what we tried to do, because his sister was actually a grade ahead of him, and we had a 5-year-old, so one that we were going to have to put in kindergarten. So what we tried to do when we came back looking around, and this is where we met. We lived in Charleston before moving to Bradenton.
Got it.
So we were familiar with the area, but things had changed, obviously, in a decade.
Yeah.
But so we tried to find a school that was comparable in size, student body-wise, to match up with the ones that they were coming out of. My two oldest went to Manatee High School in Bradenton, and at the time, I think they had about 2,100 kids in it.
Okay.
And when we moved back here, we were looking at where to go in Charleston. Wando High School here in Mount Pleasant had 2,400 kids, and that was the closest we could come. So that's why we ended up moving to Mount Pleasant, primarily because of the school. And so to answer your question, the transition wasn't, you probably need to talk to him, but it wasn't that tough, wasn't that bad for him. He came at a good time because he was transitioning in Florida, and he was playing JV. And then when he goes into the 10th grade, he was going to be borderline whether he was on JV or varsity. So the good thing for him was when he moved here, he goes on varsity because there wasn't the depth of talent at on the high school team here that they have in the state of Florida, obviously. So that kind of helped him speed up a little bit in the adjustment, I think. But that's how it transpired.
And when you guys came back and you're doing the American Legion thing for his last 3 years of high school, and you start also playing some fall events, were you guys also jumping in? Because this is the time frame. this is right about the same sort of time frame when I was coming through. I graduated high school in 1997, so I think I'm a handful of years behind your son. Were you guys jumping into some of those old AAU tournaments back then, or was it all sort of just local stuff?
It was just basically local stuff.
Did you hear about did some of the people in your area, were they participating, or was that maybe something that was done at the younger age groups, at the maybe 11, 10, 12, 13
It was still young.
Okay.
Yeah, it was still the younger stuff then.
Got it.
The biggest thing we would do is Gary Baldwin, who you mentioned a while ago, and I met in 1992. He came to the very first tournament, or brought a team to the very first tournament we hosted that year. And so I've known him, 28 years. And he would host, he would put on a tournament over there in Marietta, and we'd go over there and play, and he'd come over here and play. And we were really playing to play, and not worrying about chasing trophies and winning championships. It was about exposure to college coaches, experience for the kids, exposure to different environments. Because, back then, there really wasn't travel ball.
No.
I mean, it was basically you just played with the kids you went to school with. You played against the same kids, and, it was a different world. Nowadays, you travel all over the place. You play with different people, and, you don't necessarily – you get out of your comfort zone and just playing with your neighborhood and playing against other neighborhoods. And I know there's some people that think that's a bad thing. But here's the thing. You get recruited to go play college baseball. You can't take everybody on your high school team with you.
No, you don't. You can't.
It does not work that way. They don't take – if there's more than one that comes off a high school team that goes to the same college, that's rare.
Yeah.
Much less, okay, well, I'm going to go play over here, and my whole high school team is going to go with me because, I feel comfortable playing with them. That doesn't work that way.
Right. We were a quick story, and it sounds like my experience was very similar to your son's down in South Carolina. We had a team that we kind of put together at the 12U level to go run down to an AAU national championship, and it was literally a tryout, 1 week of practice, and we went to the tournament. And that one was in I think in Oklahoma, and there weren't a lot of teams. It was like 30 or 40 teams. We ended up bringing home the bronze. That's after 1 week of practice. We did the same thing at the 13U level. This time, at the 12U level, there was no state tournament at 12 because we were the only team. And then at 13, there was a couple of teams. We had to go play a little state tournament, and then we went to the national tournament, silver that year. We did okay. 14U year, there was a bunch. Now there's a bunch of teams. All of a sudden, in 3 years, this thing is starting to grow, and we go win that tournament. We go to the national tournament, the national championship, I think, and that was a bronze again. All right, so now we're into high school, and we play a fall. I guess that's the fall of like freshman year, I think, and I remember Donnie Phillips was my coach, who you probably run across. He's still doing this thing. He's with the Seminoles, the Virginia Seminoles, still at it. And we were playing a fall, and Lee Banks from now the Tidewater Orioles rolls up to town, and all of a sudden, looking back on it, man, that smells and looks a whole lot like what travel ball has become. And golly, I think he had a kid named Mike Kadire on that team. Lee Banks did, and you could just tell. You could tell that kid was different. So to make a short story longer, Donnie wanted us to stick together, and we all said this was crazy looking back on it. We all said no. American Legion is where everybody gets recruited out of. So we're not going to stay. This team of 15-year-olds could have whipped any American Legion team in the area. But we said, no, let's go play for those American Legion teams instead. And, we'd have, Paul Keyes from VCU would come out and see one game a week or whatever. It was nobody there. There was, if you compared to what we see on a kind of a normal weekend of travel baseball, it was laughable that's almost what we gave up to go play American Legion. So, and you were right there at the advent of this thing, right at the forefront, at least in this region, of getting going. And so at what point, where was the inflection point where you saw kids down in that area not do the American Legion and say, hey, let's go do this Diamond Devils thing exclusively? Do you remember a kind of an inflection point of, what year that might have been that you started seeing that happen?
Probably right around 2000. The first couple of years we did Diamond Devils. The first year there was no other team. Then there was one other team in the state. And then it just kind of, they saw what was going on. Kids started realizing they weren't getting the exposure. And, they weren't living. The problem with American Legion was, quite frankly, it was multiple. And I don't think people thought this way much to start with. Was, first of all, for a college coach to go watch an American Legion game, he's going to go see two teams play at one field.
Right, with one prospect on the field, maybe.
Yes, and in today's world with, travel ball and these tournaments, a guy can go and flop down at a field and maybe see 8 or 10 teams in one day. With dozens of prospects that fit what he's looking for. It's an amazing level of efficiency compared to American Legion. Yep. And the other thing about American Legion, I'm not sure, because they did it different ways in different parts. I mean, what was going on in Florida for American Legion was a whole lot different than what was going on here in South Carolina in terms of some of the rules we played under, 9-inning games. You had to play 4 games a week, and our schedule was Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. If you got rained out on Monday or Tuesday, you played on Wednesday. And, if you got rained out on Thursday or Friday, you played on Saturday. If you get rained out both days, you play Saturday and Sunday. It was a lot of baseball. And some people say, well, that's good. Well, the problem is it wore kids out.
Yeah.
And people didn't think of it along those terms of, that's not good.
Yeah.
Especially when, you're talking about guys and then 16, 17, 18-year-olds playing, they're still in the developmental process. I mean, body-wise, experience-wise, the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And I just think that, that's what got the American Legion. I went to the state board meeting 2 years in a row with proposals asking them to change it so that we could play 7-inning games, that we could play 3 days a week instead of 4, so teams could still go, so like I could play a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and still take my team to, say, Atlanta, play all 4 games on the weekend for experience and exposure. Nope, can't do that. So, okay.
Well, in most parts of the country, American Legion is no longer a big part of the recruiting process. We still have it, and it serves a purpose, just not one, from a recruiting perspective. Usually it's those seniors who are just graduated and they want to get some ABs, or sometimes it's even local kids who are still young enough they come home after their freshman year. So it's still around, but it's not what it was at that time. In most parts of the country. Now, I want to transition. We talk a lot about American Legion. You've actually been involved in another. I don't know if a league is the right way of putting it. An association that I'd like to learn more about, and no better person to ask. It's Kabba, the Continental
Yep.
Amateur Baseball Association. I'd love to.
Yep.
I don't know much about it. I'd love to learn about it. And you're listed here on the Kabba website, kabbabaseball.com, as the president and COO. So, give us the full background, how you became involved with Kabba, and I'm very curious of how it plays into, what most of us know is the sort of the traditional current state of travel baseball, how you're able to do what you do with the Diamond Devils and with your tournaments and do the Kabba stuff. So,
Okay. Well, Kabba started back in 1984 in Ohio. Several gentlemen decided they thought it would be good to put together an organization where they could sanction tournaments and events and give an option to people other than just to play American Legion or to play Little League and, whatever other sanctioning organization you want to talk about. So back in, I guess it was like 2000, Larry Redwine, who you'll see there is listed as the CEO of Kabba, he started bringing a team down every summer to play in one of my tournaments. And after the second year, he and I went to dinner, and he said, "Man, I need to get you involved in Kabba. This is what we're doing." And I said, "All right, well, let me think about it." And they had their annual board meeting that year out in Las Vegas. So my wife and I went and met and talked, and they offered me a spot on their board of directors. And with that, they offered me, knowing that I ran tournaments, they offered me a chance to host a World Series event, a Kabba World Series event. And so I thought, what the heck? Let's try it. Well, the first year we did that was 2004. We had 42 teams in the very first one we did, and we had them from all over the place. I mean, we had a team from Seattle, Washington here to play. And it was really good, and we've been doing that ever since. We're now up to doing we'll do 4 Kabba World Series this year, and we could end up doing 5 if we go back and do 18 and under again. But like you say, 18 and under has gotten kind of, taken out by colleges wanting their guys to shut down and, not play and that kind of stuff once they've been signed. So anyhow, I served on the board starting in 2002, I guess it was. I guess 2003 actually better because it was late. It was mid-December 2002 when I went out to Vegas. Well, I did that for a number of years, just kept going, and then back, what'll be now 9 years ago, there was a desire to restructure the organization. Felt like it needed to be done a little different. We were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So we restructured the board of directors, and that's when I became the president and COO. Now, the thing about an organization like Kabba is it's not a 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week type thing. It requires some work from me just about every day, some little something. But it's based upon registering teams, sanctioning leagues, sanctioning events, hosting World Series, and that kind of thing. So it's kind of like taking Diamond Devil baseball and putting it on steroids. We don't have teams; we just have the events.
Mm-hmm. And it looks like it goes all the way through the youth age groups too, all the way to the young guys. Not T-ball, but just a little bit thereafter. So it's
right.
In a nutshell, this is an event company running tournaments from youth through 18. That's all associated and done basically across the country.
Correct.
Very good.
We have, if you're on the website, you click on World Series, or sanctioned events, and just scroll down, you'll see we do World Series in Cheyenne, Wyoming. We do, we've done them in Seattle, but as you know, COVID is not being very cooperative out west at all.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what's going to transpire there. We have one in Montana, which is pretty cool. It's a really cool place. I went out to visit the thing, when they were interested in getting on board. And if you want a unique experience, and you're from this part of the world, go out to Montana.
Yep.
And it was really, really cool. And that's something that, we can offer. We have people involved from all over the place. Excuse me. That's in a nutshell. That's kind of what it is. You're right. I mean, we are mainly about running events, but we also, sanction leagues and stuff, especially at the younger ages in pockets. We have one league that, as a matter of fact, is Larry Redwine's the league in Ohio that has almost 1,000 teams in it.
Holy smokes!
He goes from he does go from T-ball up through 18-year-olds.
Wow!
And then we have a team. Unfortunately, the gentleman, and he's still listed on there, a dear friend of mine, Fran Pell, recently just passed away. And but he has been running a league that has 400 teams in it. So I'm hoping that can continue. The wife is wanting to, but we'll see how that goes. But
I actually see. I'm just scrolling through, and I see out in Cincinnati, Ohio, Jay Basil's name popped up, who was on the podcast just a few weeks ago. Yep. Great guy. What a great guy.
He and his son Jason run. Now they're going to be up to 4 Kabba World Series for us.
Yep.
They do like 14, 15, 16-year-olds. And as a matter of fact, they've added a 17-year-old for this year.
For anyone who's listening who hadn't heard that, Jay Basil is the founder of the Cincy Flames, big-time organization, and they host some outstanding tournaments out there, which is,
that's how I got with Jay. I went up and played in, 4 years played in his stuff there in Cincinnati.
That's right.
A lot of fun.
We talked about that at length. He created quite the name for himself. Man, it's just like anything else. Location. He just happens to be, if you drop a pin on where he is in Cincinnati and draw a circle, a few hours out, man, there's a lot of baseball. And so it just happens to be a really tremendous spot to host an event that coaches can all descend on a spot that's pretty close. Very good. Very, very, very good. I've seen the name Kabba, not just from you, but in other spots. So I'm glad we got to learn a little bit about this. Look, we got not too much time left. I know you got to go here shortly, but when we were talking yesterday, I asked you what was going on. You say you were super busy prepping for next year, right? It's we're recording this on December 4th, 2020, and you are prepping for the 2021 season, which in some ways doesn't really get going until June 1st. I don't know when you host your first tournament. Yeah, so the end of May.
Right.
So talk to me about how does kind of pull back the curtain a little bit and talk about, because you've got your team stuff, but you also have your event stuff. What are some of the things that are keeping you super busy? Basically, what are we talking about? Just 6 months out or so? Walk us the two listeners, me and my mom who's listening. Share some of the stuff that you have to do to prep for this stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I get parents ask me all the time, "Are you enjoying your downtime?" And it's like, if I was down, I probably would be. But really kind of what happens. Just to use this year, okay? Before we finished the fall season, which we finished the first weekend in November, was the last tournament that we hosted. I was already dealing with colleges for dates for hosting 2021 events. 2 weeks after our last tournament, we had our first tryout for next summer's teams. We have 2 more tomorrow, one up in Columbia and one up in at USC upstate in Spartanburg. So what happens is you have to start building for next year just about as soon as the season you're in finishes.
Yeah.
It's kind of frustrating in that you really don't get much downtime until a little while later. Once the high school baseball season starts, I get a little downtime because
Sure.
I don't coach high school. And it's like if I want to go watch a high school game, I can. If I don't want to that night, then I don't have to. But right now, it's like name any aspect of what we do, like ordering uniforms. In today's world, it's like you've got to order them. Well, I'll have to order them in probably February. Mm-hmm. So it's already talking to uniform companies, working on deals there, and same thing with equipment in baseball. It's just the time frame for doing stuff is much sooner after a season finishes than people understand, and it's crazy, but it is what it is in today's world. So, in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's one of the funniest parts for me. Every year, I think I laugh at this is basically right about the time the travel organization goes to its first summer event, Memorial Day weekend, first weekend of June, whatever it is. Hey, come to try out for the fall. Man, you haven't even gotten your you haven't even had your first pitch for the summer yet. You're already replacing your guys. It's so funny to me, but if you don't do it, then you won't have a team. I mean, that's just the reality. You have to plan ahead. How many?
Yes, you do.
How many? So I think you mentioned earlier, sort of a range of how many teams you generally have. How many do you anticipate for summer 2021?
I would say probably 7 or 8.
And is that all at the high school age, or are you going down into the middle school age group this year?
Well, we have 14-year-olds.
Okay.
So we do have some middle schoolers, but that's as young as we go. We've done 13-year-olds a couple times, but see, we don't do the younger ages, the 12 and under, primarily because now you're dealing with a whole different field situation.
Yes.
Field all. And like in our 13s, one of the reasons I don't really like to do 13 is that those guys are transitioning from a small field to a big field. Mm-hmm. And a lot of 13 play, 54-80 or smaller field than the 60-90 that, high school age kids play on. And for us, that's a problem because there are very few of those size fields in South Carolina.
Uh-huh.
So it's like you're forced into making those kids play 60-90 field. And for some of them, it's like, wow, this is tough.
Yeah.
I'm not physically ready to do that yet. Now, on the flip side of that, I will tell you this, on the flip side is that, now with there being middle school baseball and B team and C team baseball, depending on where you live, for high school kids, and you're getting 6th and 7th graders playing that. Well, to me, what them playing in the summer gets them ready to do that, and you only have to make the transition once instead of going, okay, well, I played 60-90 in school ball, now I'm going to go back and play 54-80, and now I'm going to go back in the summer and play 60-90 again. Mm-hmm. It's like, wow, a yo-yo.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that'd be tough.
Fun.
Hey, I've got bunch of different questions and directions I'd love to go, but in the sake of time, I know we're running up short on when you have to get going. I want to skip straight to the question I try and ask every coach, and it's really about what you think about the current state of travel baseball, and try and get your perspective on the good, the bad, and or the ugly. And I'll always try and make sure when I say bad, I'm not ragging on travel baseball. I'm just looking for, do you see opportunities for improvement? So you could take it any direction you want, but I'd love to get your perspective. You've been at this thing 22 years, so hearing your thoughts on where we're at and where we're going would be great.
Okay. Well, excuse me a second. What I see is, and it's been going on for several years, is that it's becoming saturated. When I started in this stuff, travel ball teams were all good teams. That's because, first of all, there weren't that many of them. And now you have so many teams that the market is saturated, and there aren't that many super duper teams. Now, I think in some respects, that's where the term daddy ball comes into play.
Yep.
And that, that's the real culprit. And I don't mean that the wrong way, but quite frankly, you see it all the time. And I mean all the time, where a dad just decides, hey, I got a few coins. My son didn't get to play shortstop and bat first or third or wherever. So guess what? I'm going to start my own team. And I'm going to take 2 or 3 guys, and they're not going to have to pay a penny to play. I'll fund the whole thing. That'll be great. Nobody will have to pay any money. I'll just take players because my son's going to be a star, and you wait. I'll take care of all these kids so they'll play with us. What happens? Well, not too long, either dad realizes, oh, well, this is not as easy as I thought it was. This is a bit of a struggle, and it takes a lot of work to do this stuff. And they're gone, and okay, now you got another team popping up, and it's just, if you follow my drift, it's just too saturated with teams at the moment. And obviously that's because the popularity of travel baseball is through the roof.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's a good thing in that, there are a lot of kids now playing this, good and bad. And when I say good and bad, if you know what I mean, there's good players and bad players, but there's still a lot of kids playing the game of baseball, and that is a good thing.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where I see us is, and I don't know what's going to change that. I'm not sure anything's going to change it, to be honest with you.
It's a shame. It's a shame that it exploded at the younger age groups, because in a lot of ways, when you hear about the travel ball at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, it's really just code word for Little League. And they should just stick with the Little League.
I totally agree.
The Little Leagues have been decimated when they should just stay over there until it's time. And when's it time? Well, for most kids, maybe 14, maybe 15 years old. This is my personal opinion. I don't think you need to be running around the country at 8 years old or 7 years old doing this. Why does a 7-year-old team from Richmond need to drive to Charleston to play when there's plenty of good teams here in Richmond to play at the 7U level, and vice versa? So that's just my take on it.
I don't think that travel ball should start before, really, quite frankly, before you at least get to middle school. Yeah. The rest of it should be spent playing right there in your own town, your own neighborhood. And,
yep.
If you want to make the trip, get good, and make all-stars and develop from there. But
I agree.
Unfortunately, I tell you, it makes me groan when I see these guys that are advertising. I got an 8-year-old team that's looking for players.
Yeah. You made me think of something that maybe is worth listening, just in case there's a random parent out there who's thinking about splintering off from the organization to start his own team. One of the biggest risks with that is not having the support from a recruiting standpoint from a guy like you that's been doing this for over 2 decades. And that's when you're at the older age groups, that's kind of the point. And so all of a sudden, this maybe a guy who says, "Oh, this is easy." Well, listen, ordering some uniforms and registering for some tournaments is pretty easy, but the recruiting stuff is not about the uniforms and the tournaments. It's about the relationships that have been built over decades.
Right.
And when you just slap a team together with no Rolodex and no relationships, you're not helping your kid. You're hurting your kid.
I'll tell you, that's never been more true than it is right now with the COVID issues and the colleges not being able to get out much.
Yeah. Relationship is everything.
You are not helping them a bit by you're doing the team for them.
Yes.
You're not.
Yes, you're not helping them, and in fact, you're hurting them in all likelihood. That popped into my head, Coach. Listen, I know we've run up to your drop dead time here, so man, I appreciate you coming on. It's always good talking to you.
Well, thanks. I've enjoyed it.
Do you have any parting shots? Any last words of wisdom for any coach that might still be listening?
Make sure you're not the guy who runs a kid out of baseball.
Oh, that's cool.
I tell my coaches that all the time.
That's a great piece of advice.
All the time.
Wow.
That's kind of my motto. Just don't be the guy.
Yeah. That's huge. That's huge. Listen, I'll leave you on that. Always great talking to you, and we'll talk again soon.
All right, you take care.
You
if
too.
I don't talk to you. Have a great day.
You too. We'll talk before that, I'm sure.
All right.
Have a good evening. See ya.
Bye-bye.